When forced to give my baby to my infertile sister, my family tried to prove me unfit, but I turned their plot into my greatest victory. I never thought my own family would try to steal my baby, but here I was, 23 years old, 8 months pregnant, and facing the most bizarre demand I'd ever heard. "Angela, you have to think about this rationally," my mother Karen said as she sat across from me in my small apartment. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and her voice carried that tone she used when she thought she was being reasonable, but was actually being completely insane. My sister Jennifer sat beside her, tears streaming down her face. At 32, she'd been trying to conceive for 7 years with her husband Callum. Multiple rounds of IVF, miscarriages, and failed adoptions had left them devastated and broke. But what they were asking of me was beyond comprehension. "You don't understand what it's like," Jennifer sobbed. "Every month, hoping and praying, only to have my heart broken again. This is my only chance at motherhood, Angela. You're young, you'll have more babies." My father, Robert, nodded gravely from his position by the window. "Your sister has been through hell, kiddo. You've always been the strong one. Think of her pain." I stared at them, my hand instinctively moving to my swollen belly where my daughter was growing. "Are you actually asking me to give up my baby?" "We're asking you to think about family," Mom said, her voice breaking. "Jennifer can give this child everything. A stable home, financial security, 2 parents who've been desperate for a baby for years. I am the parent," I said, my voice rising. "This is my child." "But you're unmarried," Dad interjected. "You're working 2 jobs just to afford this tiny place. The father isn't even in the picture. How is that fair to the baby?" I'd gotten pregnant after a brief relationship with David, a guy I dated for 3 months before he decided fatherhood wasn't for him and disappeared. Yes, I was young and single, but I'd spent months preparing for this baby, reading every parenting book I could find, setting up a nursery in the corner of my studio apartment, and working extra shifts to save money. "I can provide for my daughter," I said firmly. "I've been preparing with what money?" Jennifer interrupted, her tears suddenly stopping. "You make barely above minimum wage. I have a master's degree, a house with a nursery already set up, savings accounts. Callum makes 6 figures. We can give this baby the life she deserves." The way she said "this baby" instead of "your baby" made my blood run cold. "Her name is Rory," I said quietly, "and she's staying with me." The room fell silent. Mom's face crumpled and she started crying. Dad looked disappointed in a way that reminded me of every childhood mistake I'd ever made. But it was Jennifer's expression that truly unsettled me, a cold calculation behind her tears. "You're being selfish," Jennifer said, her voice suddenly steady. "You're condemning this child to poverty because of your own ego." "I'm keeping my daughter because she's mine," I snapped. "This conversation is over. Please leave." They did leave, but not before Mom pressed a piece of paper into my hand. "Just think about it, sweetheart. For all of us." It was Jennifer and Callum's financial information. Bank statements, pay stubs, a real estate assessment of their house. They'd come prepared. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure was relentless. Phone calls every day, surprise visits, text messages from extended family members who'd somehow been recruited to their cause. My Aunt Carol called to tell me about Jennifer's sacrifices. My cousin Mike sent me articles about single mothers in poverty. My grandmother, my own grandmother, told me I was being stubborn and cruel. Jennifer started showing up at my workplace, a small diner where I waited tables. She'd sit in my section, order coffee, and talk loudly about baby clothes she bought, how she'd already installed a car seat, how she'd taken parenting classes. My boss, Mrs. Chen, asked me if everything was okay at home. "Family drama," I'd said, not knowing that it was about to get much worse. The breaking point came when I found Jennifer in my apartment building's laundry room, going through my things. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. She looked up from where she was folding a tiny onesie I bought. "These are so small," she said wistfully. "I just wanted to help with the baby clothes to feel connected. You broke into my laundry." "The door was unlocked," she said, which was a lie. "Angela, please, I'm begging you. I'll pay for everything. Your medical bills, living expenses, whatever you need, just let me raise her. Get out, I said. Now. She stood up slowly, still clutching the onesie. You're making a mistake. This baby deserves better than what you can give her. That baby is my daughter, and you need to stay away from us. Jennifer's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something that chilled me, a look of pure entitlement, as if Rory already belonged to her. That night, I changed the locks. At 38 weeks pregnant, I was exhausted, swollen, and ready to meet my daughter. What I wasn't ready for was the certified letter that arrived on a Tuesday morning. Inside was a legal document that made my hands shake, a petition for emergency custody filed by Jennifer and Callum Thompson, claiming that I was an unfit mother and that the welfare of my unborn child was at risk. The allegations were brutal. Mother lacks adequate housing for a child. Mother's employment is unstable and insufficient to provide basic necessities. Mother has shown signs of mental instability and erratic behavior. Mother has no support system and has refused reasonable assistance from family. The biological father has abandoned the child, indicating poor judgment in partner selection. At the bottom was the lawyer's letterhead, Jameson Clean and Associates, one of the most expensive family law firms in the city. I called the number on the letter with shaking fingers. We represent Mr. and Mrs. Thompson in this matter, the receptionist said coolly. They're seeking emergency placement of the minor child with a more suitable family environment. The baby hasn't even been born yet. Which is why we're being proactive. Mr. Jameson would like to schedule a meeting with you to discuss a voluntary surrender of parental rights. It would be much easier for everyone involved. I hung up and immediately called every lawyer I could find. The responses were all the same. I needed at least a $5,000 retainer. Most wanted more, and everyone was booked solid for the next month. One lawyer was honest enough to tell me that going up against Jameson Clean and Associates would require significant resources I clearly didn't have. That evening, my parents showed up at my door with Jennifer and Callum. We need to talk, Dad said, about your lawsuit against me. There's nothing to discuss. It doesn't have to be a lawsuit. Callum spoke for the first time. He was a tall, thin man with perfectly styled hair and an expensive suit. We're prepared to make this worth your while. He handed me a check. My eyes widened when I saw the amount. $50,000. This is just the beginning, he continued. We'll pay all your medical expenses, give you money for a new apartment, help you get back on your feet. All you have to do is sign the papers. You're trying to buy my baby. We're trying to help everyone, Jennifer said. You get financial security. Rory gets a proper family. And we finally get to be parents. It's perfect. Get out of my apartment, all of you. Mom stepped forward. Angela, honey, be reasonable. You can't fight this. They have lawyers, money, connections. You have nothing. Don't put yourself through a court battle you can't win. I'll fight anyway. Dad shook his head sadly. Then you lose everything, including Rory. At least this way you get something out of it. After they left, I sat on my secondhand couch and cried until I had no tears left. They were right about one thing. I couldn't afford to fight this battle, but I'd be damned if I just handed over my daughter. Desperation led me to legal aid, where I met Maria Santos, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who worked out of a cramped office filled with stacks of case files. I'll be honest with you, she said after reviewing my case. This is going to be tough. The Thompsons have serious legal firepower, and their claims aren't entirely without merit. I'm not an unfit mother. You're young, single, and financially struggling. In the eyes of the court, that's not automatically disqualifying, but it's not ideal either. However, she leaned forward. There are some things about this case that bother me. Like what? Like the fact that they filed before the baby was even born. Like the way they've been harassing you. Like their clear attempt to buy your parental rights. She pulled out a legal pad. Tell me everything from the beginning. I spent 2 hours detailing every conversation, every visit, every text message. Maria took careful notes. Do you have any of this documented? Some of it. Text messages, the check they gave me, photos of Jennifer going through my laundry. Maria's eyebrows shot up. Photos? I took pictures when I found her in the laundry room. I thought it was weird that she was going through my baby clothes. Angela, this could be huge. What else do you have? I showed her everything. Screenshots of texts from family members pressuring me, a recording I'd made on my phone during one of Jennifer's restaurant visits, even the financial documents my mother had given me. They really came prepared, Maria muttered, flipping through bank statements. But so did you, apparently. She looked up at me with something like respect. You've been documenting their harassment without even knowing it. Is it enough? It's a start, but I need you to understand something. Even if we win this custody battle, your relationship with your family is going to be permanently damaged. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling Rory moving inside me. They damaged it the moment they tried to take my daughter. Rory Grace Morrison was born on a rainy Thursday at 3:47 a.m. Weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces, she was perfect. Tiny fingers that gripped mine with surprising strength, dark hair like her father's, and eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. I had arranged for hospital security to keep my family away, but somehow Jennifer found out about the birth and showed up anyway. I just want to meet my niece, she pleaded with the nurse at the maternity ward desk. Through my hospital room door, I could hear the conversation. I'm sorry, but the mother has specifically requested that you not be allowed access. This is insane. Jennifer's voice rose. That's my brother's baby in there. The nurse's voice remained calm, but firm. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave or I'll call security. An hour later, my parents arrived. Mom was crying before she even saw me. Please, Angela, she begged through the door cracked open. Let us meet our granddaughter. This has gone too far. You should have thought about that before you hired lawyers to take her from me. We just want what's best for everyone. What's best for Rory is being with her mother. What's best for me is family that supports me instead of trying to steal my baby. Dad looked tired and older than I'd ever seen him. We never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now you get to live with the consequences. They left without meeting Rory, and I spent the next 2 days in the hospital, bonding with my daughter, learning to breastfeed and marveling at the tiny human I created. The temporary custody hearing was scheduled for when Rory was 3 weeks old. I sat in the courtroom with Maria, holding my sleeping daughter, while across the aisle, Jennifer and Callum were flanked by 3 lawyers in expensive suits. Judge Patricia Williams was a stern woman in her 60s who'd seen everything in family court. She reviewed the paperwork with careful attention before looking up at both parties. This is highly unusual, she began. We're here today because the petitioners claimed that this infant is at risk with her biological mother and should be placed in their care. Ms. Morrison, I understand you oppose this petition. Yes, Your Honor. My daughter belongs with me. Mr. Jameson, present your case. Jennifer's lead lawyer was a polished man who spoke with practiced authority. Your Honor, while we sympathize with Ms. Morrison's desire to parent her child, the reality is that she cannot provide a stable, secure environment. She lives in a studio apartment barely large enough for one person, works minimum wage jobs with no benefits, and has no family support due to her unreasonable behavior. He presented evidence, photos of my small apartment, my employment records, bank statements showing my limited savings. Furthermore, he continued, Miss Morrison has displayed concerning behavior, including paranoia and hostility toward family members who only want to help. My clients, on the other hand, can provide everything this child needs: financial security, a loving home, and parents who have spent years preparing for this moment. When it was Maria's turn, she stood up with quiet confidence. Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of an unfit mother, but a case of attempted coercion and harassment. Ms. Morrison is a 23-year-old woman who has prepared responsibly for motherhood, maintained steady employment, and secured appropriate housing for herself and her child. She pulled out her evidence folder. What the petitioners haven't told you is that they have spent months pressuring, harassing, and attempting to coerce Miss Morrison into giving up her parental rights. Maria presented the text messages, the recording from the restaurant, the photos of Jennifer going through my laundry, and most damning of all, the $50,000 check. This is not about the best interests of the child, Maria concluded. This is about adults who believe money and desperation give them the right to another woman's baby. Judge Williams studied the evidence for several long minutes. Rory stirred in my arms, making small sounds that made my heart clench with protective love. I'm ordering a full investigation, the judge finally said. Social services will conduct a home study of both households, and will have a guardian ad litem appointed to represent the child's interests. In the meantime, the child will remain with her biological mother. It was a small victory, but I could see the fury in Jennifer's eyes as we left the courtroom. The social worker, Janet Patterson, was a no-nonsense woman who had been doing home studies for 15 years. She visited my apartment on a Tuesday morning, taking notes as she looked around my studio. "It's small," she observed. "But it's clean, safe, and has everything Rory needs," I replied, showing her the corner I'd set up as a nursery, crib, changing table, rocking chair, and shelves stocked with diapers, clothes, and toys. Janet watched as I fed Rory, changed her diaper, and played with her. She asked about my work schedule, my childcare plans, my support system. "I know my family situation is complicated right now," I admitted, "but I have friends who help out. My landlady, Mrs. Rodriguez, adores Rory, and I've arranged my work schedule around Rory's needs." "What about the father?" "David isn't involved by his choice, but Rory and I are doing fine on our own." Janet spent 2 hours with us, and I felt cautiously optimistic when she left. 3 days later, she visited Jennifer and Callum's house, a 4-bedroom colonial in an upscale neighborhood with a fully decorated nursery that had been waiting for years. I only learned about Janet's findings when Maria called me a week later. "The social worker's report is interesting," Maria said. "Your home was described as modest but adequate with clear evidence of appropriate preparation for the child. Rory was noted to be healthy, alert, and clearly bonded with her mother." "That sounds good." "It is, but there's more. Janet had some concerns about the Thompsons." "What kind of concerns?" "Apparently, Jennifer showed signs of what Janet called concerning attachment to a child that isn't hers. She kept referring to Rory as my baby and my daughter. When Janet corrected her, Jennifer became defensive and argumentative. My heart started racing. What else?" Callum was less involved, but made several comments about their investment in this situation and how they'd spent too much money to walk away now. Janet noted that their motivation seemed more about getting a baby, any baby, than about Rory's specific welfare. "So, what happens now?" "The guardian ad litem still has to submit her report, and then we have the final hearing. But Angela, I think we might actually win this." Jennifer and Callum weren't going to go down without a fight. Over the next few weeks, they escalated their tactics in ways that made me grateful I'd been documenting everything. They hired a private investigator who followed me to work, to the grocery store, to Rory's pediatrician appointments. They started calling my employers, claiming to be concerned family members, reporting that I was neglecting my child. When that didn't work, they tried to have me evicted by calling my landlord and making false claims about noise and damage to the apartment. But their biggest mistake was approaching my friends and co-workers directly. "Mrs. Chen," I said to my boss after my shift one evening, "I need to tell you something about what's been happening." Mrs. Chen listened as I explained the custody battle, Jennifer's harassment, and the private investigator who'd been photographing me at work. "This woman came to my restaurant yesterday," Mrs. Chen said thoughtfully. "She said she was your sister, asked many questions about you and the baby. She wanted to know if you seemed tired, if you brought the baby to work, if you talked about being overwhelmed. What did you tell her?" Mrs. Chen smiled. "I told her, 'You are one of my best employees, always on time, good with customers, responsible.' I also told her that in my country, we respect mothers who work hard for their children." Her expression hardened. I did not like this woman. She had bad energy. Similar conversations happened with my other employers, my neighbors, even the cashier at the grocery store where I regularly shopped. Jennifer and Callum's investigation was so obvious and intrusive that it was backfiring spectacularly. But the final straw came when they approached Rory's pediatrician. Dr. Rebecca Chang called me immediately after their visit. "Angela, I need you to know that a couple claiming to be Rory's guardians came to my office today demanding to see her medical records. My blood ran cold. What did you tell them? I told them that only authorized guardians are you and anyone you specifically designated, which they are not. They became quite agitated and claimed they were pursuing custody. The woman, Jennifer, actually demanded that I write a report stating that Rory showed signs of neglect or poor care. Oh my God. I refused. Of course, Rory is a perfectly healthy, well-cared-for baby. But Angela, these people are desperate, and desperate people can be dangerous. You need to be careful. That night, I called Maria with Dr. Chang's report. They're digging their own grave, Maria said with satisfaction. Attempting to access a child's medical records without authorization, harassing your employers, having you followed. This is all going in our file. The judge is not going to appreciate their tactics. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Callum's own brother, Daniel Thompson. He called me on a Thursday evening while I was giving Rory a bath. Is this Angela Morrison? Yes. Who is this? My name is Daniel Thompson. Callum Thompson is my brother. I nearly dropped the phone. If you're calling to convince me, I'm calling to apologize, he interrupted. And to warn you. I carefully lifted Rory out of the bath and wrapped her in a towel before sitting down. I don't understand. My brother and Jennifer, they're not handling this well. Jennifer has been obsessed with having a baby for years, but in the last few months it's gotten scary. She's been buying baby clothes and furniture, talking about her daughter Rory like you don't exist. My heart started pounding. What do you mean scary? She's convinced herself that you're just a surrogate, that Rory was meant to be hers. She's talked about filing false CPS reports, claiming you're on drugs, even, he paused, even what? Even taking Rory while you're at work. Callum had to hide her car keys last week because she was planning to go to your apartment. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Because I have a daughter of my own, and what they're doing is wrong. Also because I think you should know they're not going to stop even if they lose the court case. Jennifer has convinced herself that the system is corrupt, that you've somehow brainwashed everyone against her. What should I do? Document everything I just told you and be careful. I love my brother, but he's so desperate to make Jennifer happy that he's lost all perspective. After we hung up, I immediately called Maria and recounted the conversation. She was quiet for a long moment. Angela, I think we need to involve the police. This has moved beyond harassment into potential stalking and threats. The next morning, I filed a police report. Officer Martinez took my statement and reviewed all my documentation with growing concern. This is a clear pattern of escalating behavior, he said. We can't arrest anyone based on what the brother told you, but we can increase patrols in your area and establish a paper trail in case things escalate further. That evening, I noticed a car parked across from my building with Jennifer sitting inside, just watching my windows. When I called the police, she drove away before they arrived, but Officer Martinez filed another report. She's testing boundaries, he told me. This behavior often escalates before big court dates. Is there somewhere else you can stay? I shook my head. This is my home. I shouldn't have to hide from my own family. But that night, I barely slept, jumping at every sound in the hallway. The courtroom was packed for the final custody hearing. My parents sat behind Jennifer and Callum while my few supporters, Mrs. Chen, my neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, and Dr. Chang, sat behind me and Maria. Guardian ad litem. Susan Walsh presented her report first. She was a calm, professional woman who'd spent weeks investigating both households. Your Honor, after extensive investigation, I find that Rory Morrison is a healthy, well-cared-for infant who has formed appropriate attachment bonds with her biological mother. Ms. Morrison has demonstrated competent parenting skills and has provided adequate care despite limited financial resources. She paused, consulting her notes. However, I have significant concerns about the petitioner's behavior throughout this process. Their actions suggest an unhealthy obsession with obtaining the specific child, rather than genuine concern for her welfare. Jennifer's lawyer jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. The guardian's personal opinions about my client's motivations. are exactly what I asked her to evaluate, Judge Williams said firmly. Sit down, Mr. Jameson. Continue, Miss Walsh. The petitioners have engaged in systematic harassment of the biological mother, attempted to access the child's medical records without authorization, and have made statements suggesting they view this child as their property rather than recognizing her as an individual with her own rights and needs. Maria stood for our presentation. Your Honor, we have additional evidence that has come to light since our last hearing. She presented Daniel Thompson's statement, the police reports, documentation of the private investigator, and statements from my employers and Rory's pediatrician. What we see here is a pattern of escalating behavior that raises serious questions about the petitioner's judgment and emotional stability. This is not about providing a better home for this child. This is about two adults who believe their desire for a baby gives them the right to take one from its mother. Mr. Jameson's presentation was desperate and increasingly aggressive. He attacked my age, my financial situation, my single status, and my refusal to consider the child's best interests. But when Jennifer took the witness stand, everything fell apart for them. Mrs. Thompson, Maria said during cross-examination, you've referred to Rory as your daughter multiple times during this process. Can you explain why? I just feel so connected to her. I've been preparing for her for so long. But she's not your daughter, is she? Jennifer's composure cracked. She should be. I can give her everything. Angela doesn't appreciate what she has. She doesn't understand how lucky she is. Lucky to be a mother to her own child? Lucky to get pregnant so easily. Jennifer's voice rose. Do you know what I've been through? The procedures, the medications, the disappointment month after month, and she just gets pregnant accidentally and doesn't even want help. Mrs. Thompson, has Rory's mother ever said she didn't want to be a mother? Jennifer faltered. Well, no. But has she ever neglected Rory in any way? Not exactly. But has she ever indicated she would be willing to give up her parental rights? She's being stubborn and selfish. That's not what I asked. Has she ever indicated willingness to give up her daughter? No, Jennifer whispered. Maria turned to the judge. Your Honor, I think Mrs. Thompson has made our case better than we ever could. Judge Williams took a brief recess before delivering her decision. I sat in the hallway with Rory in my arms, trying to stay calm while my heart hammered against my ribs. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Williams looked tired but determined. I've been a family court judge for 18 years, she began, and I've seen many difficult cases involving child custody, but I've rarely seen a case where the motives of the petitioners were so clearly contrary to the child's best interests. Jennifer started crying immediately. Miss Morrison, the judge continued, you are young and your financial resources are limited. Under different circumstances, these factors might give me pause. However, you have demonstrated competent parenting, appropriate bonding with your child, and responsible preparation for motherhood. I held my breath. More importantly, you have shown genuine love and concern for your daughter's welfare rather than viewing her as an object to be acquired. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, while I sympathize with your struggles with infertility, your behavior throughout this process has been deeply concerning. The judge's voice hardened, attempting to coerce a young mother into giving up her child, harassment, stalking, unauthorized attempts to access medical records, and the clear attitude that this child somehow belongs to you demonstrate a fundamental lack of respect for both the law and this child's actual best interests. Jennifer was sobbing now while Callum sat stone-faced. The petition for custody is denied. Rory Morrison will remain in the care of her biological mother, Angela Morrison. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order preventing the petitioners from contacting Miss Morrison or her daughter except through legal counsel. The gavel came down with finality. In the parking lot after the hearing, my parents approached me one last time. Angela, Mom said, her voice broken. We never meant for this to happen. We just wanted to help Jennifer by trying to take my daughter. Dad looked older than ever. We thought it would be better for everyone. Jennifer was so desperate and you seemed so young. I was young. I wasn't incompetent. Can you ever forgive us? Mom asked. I looked down at Rory, who was sleeping peacefully in her car seat, oblivious to the drama that had surrounded her first months of life. Maybe someday, I said honestly. But right now, I need to focus on my daughter and rebuilding my life without people who think they have the right to decide what's best for us. Jennifer and Callum drove past us as we talked. Jennifer was still crying, and through the window I could see her looking at Rory with an expression of pure longing that made me grateful for the restraining order. That night, alone in my apartment with Rory, I finally allowed myself to cry, not from sadness, but from relief and exhaustion. We'd won, but the victory felt bittersweet. I'd lost my family, but I'd saved my daughter. Over the next few months, I focused on building a new life for Rory and myself. Mrs. Chen promoted me to assistant manager at the diner, which came with better pay and health insurance. I enrolled in night classes to finish my degree with Mrs. Rodriguez babysitting Rory while I was in class. The restraining order held. Jennifer and Callum made no further attempts to contact us, though I occasionally heard through mutual acquaintances that Jennifer was receiving therapy, and that their marriage was struggling under the stress of their failed custody battle. My parents made a few attempts to reach out. Cards for Rory's first birthday, Christmas gifts left with Mrs. Rodriguez, text messages asking about Rory's health. I wasn't ready to respond to most of them, but I didn't throw the gifts away either. The real surprise came 6 months after the court case when Daniel Thompson called me again. "I wanted you to know that Callum and Jennifer are getting divorced," he said. I felt a pang of sadness despite everything. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Jennifer has been in intensive therapy. She asked me to tell you that she's sorry for what she put you through. She knows now that what she did was wrong. I appreciate that. There's something else. Jennifer wanted you to know that she and Callum spent almost $80,000 on this custody battle. Lawyer fees, private investigators, all of it. It wiped out their savings." I was quiet for a moment. I can't say I'm surprised. The thing is, they could have used that money for adoption, for more fertility treatments, for therapy to deal with their issues. Instead, they spent it trying to take your baby. After that call, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity for Jennifer. Her desperation had cost her not just money, but her marriage, her relationship with her family, and probably her mental health. When Rory turned 18 months old, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I wrote a letter to my parents, Mom and Dad. I know this might come as a shock, but I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness and family lately. What you did was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. You tried to take my daughter from me, supported someone else's claim to her, and participated in a campaign of harassment that could have destroyed both our lives. But I also know that you acted out of misguided love for Jennifer. And I believe you genuinely thought you were helping. You were wrong, but your intentions weren't malicious. Rory is thriving. She's walking, saying a few words, and has the most infectious laugh you've ever heard. She deserves to know her grandparents. If you're willing to respect boundaries and acknowledge that I am her mother, and the only person who gets to make decisions about her life, if you want to meet your granddaughter, you can come for Sunday dinner next week. But I need to be clear. Any attempt to undermine my parenting, any suggestion that Rory would be better off with someone else, any contact with Jennifer about Rory, and you'll never see us again. The choice is yours, Angela. They came to dinner. Dad cried when he held Rory for the first time, and Mom kept apologizing until I asked her to stop. It was awkward and emotional and complicated, but it was a beginning. Jennifer never contacted me directly, but I heard through Daniel that she'd started volunteer work at a women's shelter and was considering becoming a foster parent for older children who needed temporary homes. 2 years later, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in business administration. Rory, now 3 years old, sat in the audience with my parents, Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez, and my new boyfriend, Alex, a kind, steady man who loved Rory like she was his own daughter. After the ceremony, as we were taking pictures, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I saw your graduation announcement in the paper. Congratulations, you were right. Rory belongs with you. I hope you can both be happy. Jay." I showed the text to Alex, who read it thoughtfully. "Are you going to respond?" I looked at Rory, who was chasing soap bubbles that Mrs. Rodriguez was blowing, laughing with pure joy. She was healthy, happy, confident, and secure in the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally by the people who mattered. "No," I said. "I think we've all said enough." 6 months later, I opened my own small restaurant with Mrs. Chen as my business partner. We called it Rory's Kitchen, and yes, my 3-year-old daughter was our inspiration and unofficial mascot. On opening day, I found an envelope that had been slipped under the door. Inside was a card with a simple message wishing you success and happiness. You earned it. Your parents. There was also a cashier's check for $16,000, exactly 1/5 of what Jennifer and Callum had spent trying to take Rory from me. I framed the card and put the check in Rory's college fund. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not taking the money Jennifer and Callum originally offered, if I ever wonder what Rory's life would have been like with them, if I think I made the right choice. The answer is simple. I look at my daughter, brilliant, funny, compassionate Rory, and I know with absolute certainty that she is exactly where she belongs. She's mine. Not because I can give her the most expensive things or the biggest house, but because I'm her mother, because I carried her, birthed her, and chose her every single day since. Jennifer was wrong about one thing. Rory wasn't her only chance at motherhood. But Rory was never Jennifer's chance at all. She was mine. Rory started kindergarten this fall, a confident 5-year-old who knows she is deeply loved. She calls Alex Daddy Alex and our 6-month-old son James her baby brother. We're planning our wedding for next spring. The restaurant is thriving and I've been able to buy a house. Nothing fancy, but it has a yard where the kids can play and enough bedrooms for everyone. My relationship with my parents is good now, built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. They're wonderful grandparents who never overstep, and Rory adores them. I heard through Daniel that Jennifer did become a foster parent and has provided temporary homes for dozens of children over the years. She never married again, but she found her way to help kids who actually needed her. I respect that. Last week, Rory asked me about the framed card in my office, the one from my parents wishing me success. "Why is that so special, Mommy?" Because it reminds me that sometimes people make mistakes, but they can learn from them and do better. Like when I broke your favorite mug, but then helped you clean it up and said sorry. Exactly like that, sweetheart. She nodded seriously, then brightened. "Can we make cookies for Grandma and Grandpa tonight?" "Of course we can." As I watched her skip away to find her brother, I realized that the best revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. It's building a life so good that their attempts to hurt you become irrelevant. Rory and I didn't just survive their attack on our family. We thrived despite it, because of it, and beyond it. And that, I think, is the sweetest victory of all.